Welcome to episode 42 of Walleye Chronicles. On this episode, Alex Dvorak of Echo 4 Outdoors, Neptune Rods, and he's a state rep for Ultimate Veteran Adventures. Hi, welcome to another episode of Walleye Chronicles, where I bring you guys off the street and we just talk fishing, basically. This week, I have Mr. Alex Dvorak with me today, and we're going to talk a little bit of fishing. Alex is mostly ice fishing guy, right?
For the most part, yeah.
That's he's also involved in Neptune Rods. We'll get into a little bit of that as well as we go through. And let's start. Where'd you grow up?
I originally grew up in the Howard-Suamico area. I like to say I'm the first exit past Green Bay.
The first exit. There's a fireworks stand there.
Yeah. Bayport graduate, class of 2010. I did some side jobs while I went to school for a little bit. I did 4 years in the Marine Corps, and now I am a welder / fab tech full time. And I run a nonprofit for guys and girls like myself from the military first responder community here in Wisconsin.
Awesome. So, okay, I'm gonna let's go right to what was like fishing when you're growing up. What was the first? Do you remember your first fishing outing or your first time out with your buddies? Or
I actually have a funny story from my first time ever fishing. So my Uncle Jim and my grandpa picked me up from my grandpa's place in Alloway, and we went over to Lily Lake in Green Bay. And this was, I think I was like 5 or 6 years old. And I remember we had those big, nasty plastic bobbers with the little hook on the bottom. And, you put a worm on, throw it out, and catch some bluegills. But I remember my grandpa was bass fishing, and he hooked a stump, and he was trying to get my uncle's attention because he was getting ready to fire up the motor and try a different spot. Yep. Well, he didn't hear him, and he guns it, and all of a sudden, there goes his rod. That was that.
Gone.
Yeah.
So, growing up in around Green Bay, obviously walleye fishing, all that kind of stuff. Did you do a lot of fishing as a kid? What was that kind of like?
So as a kid, I actually grew up like panfish and bass fishing. My family never really got into walleyes a whole lot. So that's relatively new to me. I didn't really get into walleyes much until I moved down to the valley 4 years ago. But yeah, I grew up.
That's kind of ironic. You started fishing walleyes when you lived in Green Bay.
Yeah, no kidding, right? If only I knew.
So when you were a kid, like you had friends and stuff, you guys go on the river, or did you do that kind of stuff too, or no, like the poles and the poles on the back of the bike and all that kind of stuff? Yeah,
I had the Suamico River just down the road from where I lived, and I would go in the spring and catch smallmouth bass. My aunt's got a place on Big Sand Lake up in Phelps, so we spent I've fished that lake for over 20 years. So a lot of your inland lakes is kind of more my specialty. If I'm not pan fishing, I'm throwing double-bladed reed runners for pike and bass and whatever else bites. Sometimes crappie if it's a right day, but that's pretty much the gist of that.
That's cool. So when you got a vehicle, got your driver's license, did that change your fishing world a little bit or no?
A little bit. I started to venture a little bit further from home and try some new bodies of water that I otherwise wouldn't get the opportunity to. And as I got older and a little bit stronger, I'd discovered inland trout fishing, and that's very addicting.
Right? I grew up doing that quite a bit as a kid. I haven't gone back to do it much lately. My sons go with my father and every now and then to do it, but I don't know what kind. So ours is more of like the small stream with the weeds and stuff hanging over it. So it was tick central and central Wisconsin.
Mosquitoes too.
Right. Yeah. But I never really got into like the whole fly fishing, that kind of thing. It was more just a spinning rod, a sinker, and a hook with a crawler on is pretty much it.
Same here. If I'm trout fishing, I have my black with gold spot on the panther martin or the yellow with red spots. That's the only thing I throw for trout. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Right. I always used to love that because we'd always like sneak up to the first bridge because if you made any noise, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
And sneak up there, just get a quick flip in there. I always liked trout. Fun. But they don't really do much with the streams much anymore either, though. I don't know if you like where I originally started fishing. They don't really do. Back in the day, they used to do like stream care and cut things, and now it's just kind of all overgrown mess.
Sure. I think it depends on the stream itself. I spend a lot of my trout time up towards like Amberg, Pembine area.
Okay.
And I think for the most part, it seems like those are pretty well taken care of. There is one stretch of, I believe it's the North Branch of the Pike River, if I'm not mistaken. I'm kind of a Star Wars nerd, and I had a buddy with one time, and we were walking. It's really narrow, like barely wide enough for two people, and like I think at the deepest part, it's up to your knees. It's a really small, but there's some big fish in it, surprisingly. Yep. And we were joking how in one of the Star Wars movies, when Rey Skywalker was doing the Jedi obstacle course through the jungle, yep. I'm like, yeah, my rod is my lightsaber, and you have to cast like a Jedi and avoid all the stuff, or you're gonna hang up in a tree.
Right? It is crazy to get into that, but it's kind of the fun of it too sometimes. But then it's always when you get up to the stream and then you get too close, and obviously, like you always don't want to get. You never want to get too close because all the noise and stuff kicks them away, but you don't want to be too far away because then you get caught up, and then you get that last step, and all of a sudden you see. There they go.
It happens.
That's cool. So through high school, now you moved on. Did you get to do any hunting or any fishing in the Marines? Was there any time you got to pull out and do that kind of stuff, or anywhere you could?
A little bit, not as much as you would think. When I was stationed in Okinawa, I did some surf fishing on Camp Courtney. We were right on the coast. I threw 10 casts, and 10 casts in a row, I got broke off on the rocks. And I'm like, yep, I'm done. I cracked open a beer and just sat in the sand and took that L like a champ.
That's funny. I mean, at least you tried.
It was worth the effort. Supposedly there's a little piece of fresh water on the island that has pretty big bass. Mm-hmm. But that part of the island is very anti-American.
So a Marine walking over there is probably not a great idea.
No, that's a deduction in rank, like instantly.
So then you get out, and what kind of took you back to fishing?
It's been my passion. You can ask any of my friends or family, whether I'm fishing or if I'm just visiting. If there's a body of water, I instantly just stare and I'm like, "Oh, where's the fish at?" I love aquariums. I love underwater life. I'm 2 scuba dives and a CPR class short of being rescue certified for scuba diving.
Awesome.
I couldn't recite all the species now because I kind of. Obviously, there's no saltwater around here, but when I was over in Okinawa, I had this book and I read it religiously, and I could name every type of species, what was poisonous, what wasn't, what would the symptoms be if this fish bites you. Because I wanted to know, what's harmful and what's not. Because I want to touch it. I want to get up close and, whatever. So I think having that scuba time when I had the lack of fishing time kind of kept me in that ballpark. But then when I got back stateside, then that's when I had the freedom to, start fishing again.
So what's that like being down there? Do they like know you're there? And
for the most part, I mean, sometimes there's some that I'll like kind of, if I'm on like a transition point on a ledge and there's a bunch of coral, sometimes they're just kind of sitting there chilling. So if they're like back like this and the coral sticking out, they won't see you until you come past. And sometimes you can see their eyes light up and, you can see the fear. But I think the bubbles from our air, our BCDs are a little noisy. So I would think that
kind of they let them know they're coming. Kind of they know you're coming.
Yeah.
That's cool. I have a terrible fear of drowning. So I've always wanted to scuba dive. I've talked to people that do it, and a guy I used to work with that did it for work. He was more of like a bridge kind of mechanic and stuff like that. And so he would dive and fix things along bridges and stuff. And he would talk about how walleye is set up and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, man, that'd be cool. Like you, I love fish tanks. And when I go to Cabela's, the first place I go, if I'm like going to the bathroom, it's like I always walk through the tank all the time.
Yeah.
One of the coolest things, even though they look really big in the tanks. I don't know if it's the glass, because those crappies look like they're about 35 feet long. They're just huge.
I know. One of these days I'm going to sneak in there after hours and take one of my Neptunes and see if I can't.
That's funny. I always wanted a fish tank, and I just, I use, like in the winter now, all my minnows, I have a fish tank in the basement. Like most of us do, and you throw them in there for the week or whatever. Keep to the next week because it's expensive to have minnows, and I always wanted to have one with. And I had a small bass I caught last year, and it wasn't doing so well, and it was bleeding. So I kept it. I put it in the tank, thinking, it will live, maybe it doesn't. And it lived most of the summer. Actually, lived until a friend of mine gave me his minnows. He didn't want them, and then everything. So he must have had a bad or sick minnow. But fishing, they seem like a lot of work, but they'd be really fun to have.
Yeah, I actually had an aquarium growing up, and I actually brought it down to where I live in Neenah now. But my water is very hard, even with the filtration system, and obviously,
Like, I would like regular fish. I mean, I don't really care about like saltfish, or give me like a bass, smallmouth, a bluegill, something like that. But that'd be kind of cool. I feel like if you put them in a small tank, they're never going to really get very big, and you kind of,
yeah,
maybe we're all living in a tank, somebody else's tank, right?
you never know.
So after the military, you come back and you got right back into fishing.
Yeah, for the most part. When I got out of the military, I started working 2 weeks almost to the day that I returned home. And yeah, I just slowly started building my arsenal back up. My childhood tackle box disappeared. Still don't know. And I had so many lures in there. I have no idea where it ended up. Not a clue. So I bought some rods, I bought some tackle, and just started acquiring some stuff slowly. And around the time that I got out, I went to the Brown County Veterans Office to submit my DD-214 and apply for benefits. And I met someone who is now my absolute closest, most trusted friend. And I remember the first conversation we had after we were done talking military stuff. We could see the Bay of Green Bay from his house, or from his office. And I'm like, oh man, I should really get back into ice fishing. Because growing up, all we would do is run tip ups, and my uncles would crack a beer, and
the fun times.
Yeah, exactly. But we never really like jig fish for panfish much. So I had started fishing the bay a little more and perch fishing. And 8 years ago, Thanksgiving Day was the last time that I was actually able to walk onto the bay prior to December rolling. It was like 2.5 to 3 inches of ice. It cracked every time I took a step, but it took me longer to walk from Longtail to my spot and back to shore than it did to catch my limit. And that's with being selective.
Wow.
But yeah, over time, I've, we fished the bay for a couple years in a row, and then we kind of started getting sick of perch fishing. So then, my buddy, his name's Matt. We started exploring some other lakes, and we went up north towards the Phelps area because of my aunt's cabin, and I know some of those lakes pretty well, and started getting bluegills and crappies. And over time, I never went on Facebook asking for spots or pointers. I literally took a big enlarged map of Vilas County, blindfolded myself, threw a dart, and whatever lake was closest, that's the one we chose that weekend.
That's cool.
And I everything I've done up to this point, I'm kind of self-made in a sense.
We got to do that more often. I think we get stuck in our honey holes or our spots we're used to. I'm guilty of it. I'll run my stuff out on Winnebago for weeks on end, even if there's no tournaments or nothing. I'll still go out there. They're fun. I recently started to go other places. Go, okay, you go fish. Even if it doesn't really matter for tournaments or whatever, just to get someplace else. You learn different things, I think.
Definitely.
Right? Instead of just doing the same thing over again. I need a jig and a minnow, learn all these different things.
Yeah.
And catching different fish. Breaking down the lake is fun too, I think.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So when did you and Neptunes get involved with each other?
So I first joined the Neptune team as pro staff that 2 or 3 years ago. So basically I kind of got into the pro staff game. I was with a different nonprofit from the one that I'm with now at the time. And I thought that if I start pro staffing for these companies, when we need support for larger events or donations, we'll pump out all the content, and then they just send us some product and,
giveaways.
Exactly. And Neptune stuck out to me. So I initially found them through, I don't know if you know Caleb Wistad from Hooked Up, Wisconsin. He's like a big YouTuber, and he's part of the Clam crew now, but he had a post on his Facebook page, and I was the first one to message him, and we did a FaceTime and kind of told him a little bit about my story and this and that, and they brought me on, and it just so happened to be a veteran-owned business, so it was a match right from the get-go. And the goofy handle takes a little getting used to, but if you do have that carpal tunnel issue, or if your forearms ever get really stiff, that's very ergonomically friendly, and You know, that something with the science and that angle of the handle, it's a super easy hook set. You just have to flick your wrist. You don't have to wrench on it like a lot of people do, or high sticking as we call it. Like my buddy Matt again, he's a like couple inches shy of 7 feet, and he likes to, you know, touch the clouds, and he wonders why he never catches that fish. And I tell him, I'm like, dude, when you touch the roof of the shack, you're putting slack in the line.
That's a lot to get your hand up there and reel back down faster. You know, most people, when they do that, they got to get up and start reeling to bring it back down. But yeah, if you hit the shack, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Especially for a tall guy like that. It's crazy.
Yeah. So I ran a couple rods that first winter. I noticed, and what really sold me on Neptune as those days where every element that makes the fish really tight-lipped is present. High winds, major barometer change, moon phase, you name it. You know, you can throw the entire kitchen sink down there and they'll follow. They'll sit right on it. You can watch them on the graph. They're all over your bait, but they just aren't biting. With our ultralight lineup, you can literally tell the difference between a pectoral fin, flicking the bait as they swim by, when they blow water on it, when they do the slurp and spit. You can literally tell the difference as long as you're watching your rod tip. You won't be able to feel it, but if you're watching, and that I catch twice as much fish on those tough days as I do any of the bigger like St. Croix or 13s of the world. And that's what really sold me on Neptune. And we come with a lifetime guarantee. I don't know any other rod manufacturers that come with a full lifetime guarantee.
Not that I'm aware of now.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, it is kind of a weird handle. Does it support itself? Like, can you sit on the ice? Does it support itself, or does it tip over? Because it like that's what the handle be a weird like tripod.
I've done it in the past. I don't really do that much, but I know if you have the reel in the right position, you could essentially dead stick it and just let it sit there. I just recently learned too that we do have a straight handle lineup that we came out with last year for auto setting devices. But our 28-inch rods actually fit in most auto setting devices as well. I actually just put a couple clips on our social media pages of our owner, Phil. He lives over in Alaska, and he was on the Mississippi last weekend on some backwater pike fishing, and I got some good, couple blooper reels, but a couple nice hook sets as well.
Hey listeners, let's talk outdoor streaming. What is the best outdoor streaming platform out there? Well, it's simple. It's Fixed TV. Not only do they have this great program, but they have all kinds of hunting and fishing shows along with some weaponry shows. So when you get bored and need something to do, get your fix with Fixed TV. And when you're done with that and you have that fix to get out in the outdoors, jump on therealshot.com and get everything you need to satisfy your fix.
Oh, and he was using the automatic fisherman.
That backwater Mississippi is fun.
Yeah, I've done it once on an airboat, and I think when we did that trip, that was the first year I was with Neptune. We did a team day. And we had 2 or 3 airboats worth of people, but the same one was going back and forth. I think all the noise, because there was also another crew with a different airboat in that same bay. I think all the noise pushed a lot of the fish out, because we didn't really catch that many today, but I know it can be good.
Right.
Someday I'd like to get back and try it again.
That's crazy. I was up there last fall to kind of pre-fish for NWT, and just the first time I've really ever fished Mississippi. I've been on it, but never really fished it. And getting into the backwaters and that whole world, we were there I think for 3 days, and I don't think I even scratched the surface. We did like one day on the river, below the dam, wing dam, that kind of fun stuff, and then we went back into the back bays and way back. Gotta be almost a half mile off the river, and it like in a whole different, but it was still 20 feet deep and 3 mile an hour current and walleyes everywhere. But so are they going to do any do they do any full size rods? Are they ever thought like doing it, or would that be too hard for your elbow?
So
because I would see if you're like a jig fisherman, like a spring guy, I think that would be cool too as well, because the whole that whole game.
So besides the straight handle rods, we also came out with a prototype last year of a 44-inch rod that we call the hole hopper. But I actually tested it on some trout water and in the kayak this summer. If we're gonna make a trout rod, we need to get a stronger backbone. I hooked into an 8-inch brookie and I thought it was gonna break. But it's the perfect like panfish or largemouth bass rod out of a kayak. I have mentioned it to Phil, but our name is Neptune Ice Rods. So I don't know. We'd have to sell a lot more, I think, to dabble in the open water game. But I'm trying to talk him into like a 50 or like a 55-inch hole hopper that we can maybe do some open water stuff with. We're kind of slowly working that way, but I don't see us going that route anytime soon.
It is a very unique thing. I fished with one once, and I did. It was weird at first. Kind of threw me for a loop. But yeah, I mean, it was a nice pole. I didn't have any problems with it. It was pretty. It was odd.
Like I said, it takes some getting used to.
It takes some time. I was like, I caught a fish on it. I'm like, okay, this is cool. But my whole thing was just like, because the difference between up and wrist is,
Yeah.
So I had to assume I didn't look great doing it. That it wasn't the most beautiful hook set in the world, but
hey, we'll just take your word for it.
So tell me a little about your nonprofit, about what you're working with.
So I run a chapter of Ultimate Veteran Adventures here in Wisconsin. They are technically based out of Ohio. The founder, Joe Wesner, is a multiple Purple Heart recipient, and our mission is to create inspiration through the outdoors via anything from fishing trips, hunting trips, horseback riding, gardening, literally anything outside, you name it, we do it. Now, the last 3 years, I was part of a different group as a field staffer, but I decided to branch out and do my own thing because I didn't agree with some of the policies. And to me, it looks goofy when the same group of veterans go out time after time, year after year. And that kind of, in my eyes, defeats the therapeutic purpose of the trips. So nothing against those guys. I got nothing but respect for what they do.
You just want to spread the love.
Exactly. Like they're like every veteran has a place at my table. But when you turn the table into all you can eat buffet, it's like, okay, you either need to help me host a trip or maybe not sign up for this one and let someone else out. Because there's so many, it's amazing. This past September, I got selected for a second year that they're operating. It's called Missions of Honor. It's through Old Glory Honor Flight. They do a 4-day trip to New York City and it's specifically for post 9/11 veterans that deployed in support of Operation Iraqi or Enduring Freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't believe how many people on that flight had not a clue that services like mine existed. So I kind of took that personally, and now it's my mission to take fresh faces out every time I do a trip. That's not always the possibility given the last minute nature of a posting or the time of week, whatever the case. But anytime I work with a charter or a guide, like especially my buddy Diehard Angling, I do stuff with him all the time. I always try to get at least a 2-month notice so I have enough time to seek out those first timers or those newbies. Gotcha. If it's something like if I'm on a long work week and it's Wednesday and I'm like, hey honey, what are we doing this weekend? She's like, yes, you can go fishing Saturday morning. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm like, all right, first 2 to come, it can go. And we'll go from like 6 to noon and just part around Winnebago for a little bit. But yeah, anytime I do like a guided hunt or a guided fishing trip, I will go out of my way. If I have to call every VA in the state, I will find a fresh face.
That's awesome. So what's that like for them?
Therapeutic. I don't try to push into their story too hard. I kind of just read the room and flip the pages in the book as long as they're willing. Most of the time they're in a good place. They don't really need to talk about much. Usually turns into like a funny story, or we'll talk about a combat related story and they'll be like, yeah, I was on this patrol and this dude shot at us and I shot back and he fell and I saw his brain matter on the wall. It's just like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. But most of the time they just want to escape the realities of everyday life and just put a line in the water and relax.
Do you get help with that too as well, or no?
Yeah, I get all sorts of help from the community. I've got a long list of sponsors that support me and what I do with them. And quite a few guides, Brock and Reel and guide service. I'm going to do some stuff with Burnsy's guide service. Most of the guys that do the Bay, Eyes Only, Bill Schmidt, he's an Air Force veteran. He's probably got the best price point in the area compared to some of the bigger names, and he catches just as much fish. Bill, if you hear this, I love you, buddy. Thank you.
Awesome.
But yeah, I get tons of help from just even regular Joes from the community. Yeah, we got a good program in place.
That's cool. Hoping to get more and more and more. Keep going.
Yeah, the more support I get, the more of an impact we can have. So
fishing, hunting stuff, and is there anything else, or you said like everything you want to do basically?
Yeah, anytime there's
outdoors.
Yeah, like we have a Operation Horses Heal. I don't know if it's gonna pan out this year, but I know we've been emailing about doing like a horseback riding day. There's the Door County Farm for Vets. And I don't know if this year's gonna work out or not, but I know down the road we're gonna do like a gardening class and some stuff like that.
That's cool. That's pretty awesome. Anything to help out the vets, man.
Yeah, exactly.
So back to fishing. Why fishing?
Why not?
Right. What's your favorite thing to do?
I think my favorite thing to do is target crappies on ice. I don't know what it is, that adrenaline you get. The only thing that's more enjoyable than pulling a slab crappie through the ice over a basin is when you're duck hunting and you get a big flock of greenheads that are all just committed. Like
right.
you don't even have to call. They see it and they're coming right for you. Especially like I was touching earlier on those hard to get them to bite days.
Yep.
The satisfaction when you feel that thump and you set the line and right away they're screaming drag.
Right.
I don't know how to explain it. It's addicting.
So do you open water fish a bit too, or?
Yeah. So open water, typically the way I fish is when I'm ice fishing, I normally go for panfish and I'll run a couple tip ups, and if something big bites, cool. If not, whatever. Right. I like to run and gun and follow the schools. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of like a younger Ryan Salami in that case, I guess. Shout out to Ice Junkies. But in the open water, if I'm not in a trout stream, I'm in my boat and I'm either throwing spinners for bass and pike, dead sticking off the side for perch, or attempting to learn the science of trolling and catch a bunch of sheephead.
Thank God there's sheephead though.
I know that. Well, they actually fight, unlike walleye, when it feels like a wet sock.
Yeah, right. And you learn a lot from, especially in Winnebago. I mean, I'm guessing other places don't have the sheephead issues that we have, or whatever. But it does help you. I mean, I'm not very far removed from learning how to troll myself, and the sheephead helped. They make the days not so long. Yeah. You go days when you're doing nothing and catching nothing. That's tough. You catch, other days you're catching 30, 40 sheephead. Yeah, there's sheephead, but you're still learning. Right? You're still figuring out how things work. And as a friend of mine, when I first started, said, if you're catching sheephead, the walleyes are there too, whatever. But so how was that to learn? How's it been for you to learn how to troll?
A struggle. So my first year living down in the valley, I went over to Fish Tales in Oshkosh and grabbed a bunch of Corey's custom colors.
Yep.
My first time out on Winnebago, I actually still had a 14-foot John boat with like a little 4-horse 1970s putt Johnson. And I almost couldn't make it out of Asylum Bay, but I was hell bent. Like nothing was stopping me. Looking back, I probably had no business being out there. But I was trolling with spinning rods. I would just throw this flicker shed out behind me. I got my rod in one hand, the other hand I'm doing this with the motor just to keep it in a straight line from how choppy it was. I think there was like 4-foot rollers. And I would just wait until I felt the bite, pull it in. And that particular trip was funny because one of those, I call them the sparkly walleye boats, one of those tournament guys.
Yep.
He had 4 boards on each side and was constantly cutting me off and doing circles around me. I was just going between the lighthouse and the point.
Yep.
Just down and back, because that's what Corey, he's like, oh yeah, there's, east wind. Yeah.
Rocks in there. It's nice. Yep.
And I didn't see him pull a single board in, but in the hour that I went down and back however many times I was catching white bass, I was catching sheephead, but no walleyes. But I was staying busy.
Yep.
Finally, I hooked into a sheephead as I was going south from the point towards the lighthouse, and it took me forever because it just gorged that bait. So both trebles were pretty lodged in there. And by the time I popped it out, it was almost dark. I'm like, one more pass. So I was in between the rock pile and the lighthouse. And as soon as my boat was level with the lighthouse, I felt that thump.
Yeah.
And you know how when you get that one, like, okay, you know damn well that's a walleye. I knew right away. Pull it in. I'm like, oh my gosh, it actually is one. I scooped my net, got it. And I turn around, and that tournament guy was right there, and I could see the look on their face in the dark. And I'm like, sometimes the little boats get the big fish. And I held it up and went back to shore and had a fish sandwich for dinner.
That's awesome. Yeah, sometimes that's the best way to do it, just to pull over to the side and hold on to it. It's so much fun. That's what I like doing bottom bouncers too.
Yeah.
Just holding on and feeling that thump. Because trolling it's a lot of fun, especially get the boards and all that kind of stuff out. But at the same time, it kind of monotonous too in a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to feel that thump anymore.
Yeah. Well, especially on Winnebago too, I can tell when I pick up weeds versus on boards you can't. So you could be trolling all day long. Oh, the fish weren't biting. Right. Every board you pull in's got weeds on it.
Yeah, you got to check them bad boys every so often. You never know.
Yeah.
Especially down there. But the weeds seem to be getting taller in that area than they were in years past. The water clarity kind of cleaning up.
Mm-hmm.
Sun's getting to the bottom a little deeper now, so we're getting weeds in different spots now. But
maybe even the water levels.
It's crazy how clear the lake is becoming.
Yeah.
I know people don't like the zebra mussels. They are kind of clearing the lake up. I don't really understand don't really know how that works. I mean, I know we're supposed to hate zebra mussels, we're supposed to get rid of them, but at the same time, it's kind of cleaning the lake up.
Yeah, until we get the algae bloom again.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we're good until then. So it's like, okay, let's go. It's nice, it's clear, but then all of a sudden, everything's green. But bagel.
Yeah.
But it's crazy because sometimes I go to reefs and places where I've never been able to see the bottom, where now it's like 10 feet of water and I can see the bottom.
And I think that's why the last couple of years, at least from what I see online, on like the Winnebago Junkies page or the other forums, that a lot of people seem to be struggling on this. I wonder if that's playing a factor.
I think so, because your colors are going to be different, right? We're going to spend our whole lives, or up until now, you spend your whole lives doing certain colors. Because dark water now it's clear, and you got to go into the world. Like Mille Lacs went through the same thing where it was dirty lake. Now it's crystal clear, and they also have a smallmouth population that's blowing up like we do. I mean, there's so many smallmouth in that lake. It's crazy.
I know. That's probably my favorite fish to cast for, especially in Door County when you're in deep water and you hook into like a big 5-pounder.
Those are the weirdest ones to get on your trolling too, because immediately it looks like, because they'll start digging real hard right away. So you're like, oh, it's a big 20-inch walleye, big 20. Then all of a sudden, 2 seconds later, you'll see something just fly out of the sky, and the board just pops back up, and then they just kind of cruise in and wait for you to bring them in. And it's the weirdest thing. You're like, oh,
yeah.
Yeah, it's fun though. It's definitely fun. I think learning the troll is a fun thing. Do you do anything else, what other things you do for walleyes or no?
I do like your jig and crawler, jig and minnow. This past summer, the only walleyes I got on the Winnebago system were jig and crawler. I didn't pick up a single walleye trolling. Everything was on the jig stick.
Right. That was one of those years where the jig and crawler is coming back, or jig and crawler and whatever else you're throwing on there. I even started doing slip bobbers more often than ever. I mean, as a kid, spring, doing them on the rock piles, but I started doing them all year long.
Yeah.
And they work. It just, I don't know. Kind of what's old is new again, right?
Exactly.
So any other kinds of crazy fishing that you do?
I mean, if ice fishing counts as crazy, going on, a frozen lake, I guess you could say that, but I mean, I'm pretty much your stereotypical Wisconsin fisherman. I go on hard water in the winter, open water when it's not froze. I don't really fish in the spring a whole lot, and several reasons. One, I think a lot of the tributaries to the Bay of Green Bay need to be reevaluated for sanctuaries. Because what sense does it make that the pure, however many feet from the dam is a sanctuary, but then Styles is like the wild, wild west. And Peshtigo, I think they need to just push it down a little more.
Yeah.
And I think they need to look at Menominee too. So I don't like I've done some pan fishing in the past when they're on their beds, but I think between over harvesting, I think there's a lot of lakes that need to have smaller bag limits, especially with all the fancy forward facing sonars nowadays. Don't get me wrong, I love the technology, it's fun to use. But if you look at it from a conservation aspect and what's going to happen 20 years
Right.
from now when everybody's got that technology, nature doesn't have a way to compete with that. So when everyone's always, all the part-time YouTubers come out in the spring and go to the pier, oh, look at this 30, I'm not one of those.
That is fun though.
Oh, don't get me wrong. Like I'll maybe go, in one of my buddy's boats like once or twice a spring. Otherwise, I've got a friend in New London that has one of those rafts. So we'll putz around there for a little bit. But yeah, otherwise I'm not very big on spring fishing.
See, I grew up spring fishing in just outside of Rica. We used to have a cabin on the water. And it was a lot like the rafts, but we just weren't on the rafts. It was all cane poles. Everything was a cane pole from shore, get out as far as you can. God, that was so much fun. So I grew up doing that. So the spring, the coming off, the ice coming out is kind of like just in my heart of things I gotta do. I always want to do the raft thing too. I've been wanting to get on the raft thing. That's pretty fun. And just cane poles. Cane poles, catching a walleye with a cane pole is a whole different world. And it's so much fun.
It is, but wait until you get one of those like 20-pound flatheads on a cane pole. My buddy Old Man River, as we call him, Joe Thielman, he's a Southern gentleman, a transplant from the South that lives up here now. Boy, does he get excited when he gets a big catfish.
My dad, growing up, I had my dad on a few episodes ago. And growing up, we would go jig flatheads during the summertime with cane poles. So you go up in the rivers, up if it's by Princeton or way up New London, and you get all the areas that all the trees and stuff are smashed in there. So he would take, because I wasn't big enough to do it yet, and he would drop cane pole. It was a bigger cane pole, and he would drop right in there with a big old Kaylee hook and a rock bass, and right down to the bottom of it. Sure enough, he would hook on, and you just be jigging it, all of a sudden you just see it just stop. And then like 2 seconds later, he was just giving the old heave ho. And then it was wild if half the time we didn't get him out of there because he would drop in places that I'm like, you ain't getting any fish out of there. What are you doing? Or we would switch spots and, I'd have to fire the motor up and drive him out of there. And that was kind of fun. Cane pole fishing is so much fun. Bring that back.
Should try to do that a little bit more often.
Right.
It's been a while since I've grabbed a cane pole.
They're a lot of fun. I mean, I don't know where you can get them from anymore. I mean, we always used to get them from a place in Winneconne, but I don't think they sell them anymore. Up New London, I think, has a place that has them. It's got to be because the guys that have them somebody's got to be able to get them up there if all the raft boats are on them. That whole thing is crazy to me. Those things are just blow my mind too. The different rafts.
Some of them are like super fancy,
right?
Like you got a generator with electricity, AC. Like when I was out there this past spring with Joe, we were watching the poles through the windows, and we had the that movie that was made about the Johnny Cash story on the TV. I don't remember what it was called, but there was a bunch of boats that kept screaming by, and I was in a recliner, and the waves, and all of a sudden I like woke up. I had drool on my face. He's like, "Man, you missed a fish." I'm like, "I saw it in my dreams."
That's funny. All those little things are fun. Look at the old time stuff. Bring it back. So ice fishing. Where are you at right now?
What do you mean by that?
As like, if you're going out this weekend, where would you go?
So
are you hunting down on the big perch on Winnebago right now?
No. So I actually avoid the Winnebago system on ice like the plague. That's the only body of water I've ever almost went into the drink on.
Okay. What happened?
So this was, I couldn't tell you how many years ago, pre-military, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, my buddy and I went out, I believe it was off Merritt, probably 3-4 miles offshore roughly.
Yep.
And we were fairly close to a big ice shove where the truck was parked. And it was one of those years where February kind of had a warm spell.
Yep.
It was like 30 degrees that morning before the sun came out. Once the sun came out, it was quite warm.
Yep.
But there was no snow on the ice. So what a lot of fishermen that go on Winnebago don't realize is when the ice is clear, that sun is shining through, beating up the surface, but the plants are absorbing that sunlight and it heats up the water, and it's actually deteriorating from the bottom too. And it was super windy that day. And about like, we got down there when it was still dark. I want to say it was like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It sounded like a grenade went off under the ice. You know, you could tell like one of the big shelves had finally busted loose.
Yep.
And where the shove was actually turned into a little bit of a water spout. There was water shooting up out of the ice. And his truck was slowly, if you just stare at it with the naked eye, you could see it was slowly starting to slide that direction. So I look at him and he looks at me and we both look at the truck, and then we just do this. We grab our stuff, just throw it in the back, jump in. And it took us probably 45 minutes to find the bridge because the clubs had come through and moved the bridges over the crack. By the time we found the bridge and got to that last, 400 or 500 yards to shore, whatever it is, there was so much water on top of the ice that it was almost to the top of his tires. So I'm hanging out the window by the snap handle, like I did that PG-13 for you. And I'm literally hanging out, getting ready to jump because I thought the ice was cracking. It was super loud. I thought we were going in. And ever since then, I'm like, yeah, you could offer me a sleeper shack, $1 million cash, multiple days limit, a big perch and walleye. I'm good on Winnebago.
It took me a while. I grew up locally in Berlin, but I moved to Oshkosh, and it took me like 4 or 5 years to get comfortable enough to go out. I go out with other people. I never really, I drove out a little bit at first, but then there was a pretty terrible father and son that died on the lake when I was, my kid was the same age as him at the time. And we were all on the same road the same day. Like there was probably, there's 100 trucks that go off that road that day, and he was one of the later trucks. So like we all drove in that same spot. And from that moment on, I haven't drove a vehicle up there, but I take my 4-wheeler year round, and I kind of have done the new task. If they're walking, I'm not going. If they're on 4-wheelers, I'm walking. And then after that, if they're in the trucks, then I'm 4-wheeling. I kind of stay one step behind everybody to make myself safe. Because we've all had, scary moments per se of, I've done things that I drove on Green Lake one time. I got around to where I was going to fish, and I drove the hole, and there was only like 8 inches of ice. And I'm like, okay, well, time for me to go. But it was nice. It was nice. I was probably pushing the limit of the ice, but as soon as that first hole went through, I thought to myself, that's weird. It went through pretty fast. And I immediately got in the truck and drove off. I got back to the shore, and I'm like, okay, well, need to start stopping and checking. And other places were good. I just happened to get in a bay that didn't have a lot of ice. So yeah, ice fishing is definitely, it's weird because around here, and I don't do a lot of pan fishing, so it's more walleye. So it's basically Winnebago or Green Bay maybe, or Huygen. So the ice isn't always great for us. Right? I mean, if you're fishing smaller lakes and bluegill fishing like that, you seem to get more time in the year, right? Or lately over the last 3-4 years, I feel like I don't get much time. Maybe the first of the year to middle of February, and that's it.
Yeah.
I look at everybody in Minnesota and why we're deer hunting. They already got 6 inches of ice already out there, and they're 4-wheel. It's like,
yeah.
So you said you got a new boat or got a upgraded.
Yes.
So what'd you get?
17.5-foot Procraft.
Nice.
Fishing ski. So nice. I chose that because I wanted something wider. Because with my 2 beagles and my wife, the aluminum canoe of a 1980 Mr. Pike that I had was just too narrow. And my friend sold it to me at a price that was too good to pass up, because I figured I'll run it this year. If I don't like it, I can sell it where I can make money on it.
Right. You don't lose money on boats anymore.
No, but it's nice because it came with I don't remember which Hummingbird. I know it's got iPilot. It's got a walk-through windshield. The front half of the boat is a shallow deck, kind of like bass fishermen use. Yep. And the back half is a deeper hull for like trolling. I went from a 50 horse to a 125. This is the first boat where I've ever actually had power trim. So that was a little adjustment to get used to finding that right tilt percentage. But my selling point was, if we want to go on the boat, but she doesn't want to fish, we can use it to like pull a tube or something like that. So, and it's got a nice white color with like a glossy red stripe. So now I'm gonna be that asshole running holes around the John boats.
Right. It's funny. Yeah. I think we all use the fish and ski to talk the wives into. At least I did off the bat. We did a lot more of that stuff when our first couple of boats than we do now. And now it seems like my wife says, it seems like this boat is just for fishing now. I'm like, we can drive around the lake if you want, go for a cruise. That's cool. So what, have you had it out yet? Was last year your first year with it, or?
Yeah. So,
so how did change your fishing?
Oh yeah. I can get on places on Winnebago that I normally couldn't. There was one day where I launched from the County A in Neenah, new one that they just updated.
Pretty nice.
Love that launch. But I went all the way up to the river mouth in Neenah, hit all those reefs, went actually into the park a little bit, and went all the way to the river mouth in Oshkosh. And I literally hit every reef in between and still had enough fuel in my tank to get to the landing at the end of the day.
That's go faster though.
Oh yeah. Though there's one day I went out and I wanted to see how fast I could get it. It was glass. Like you don't see it that flat on Winnebago very often. And I think I had it going about 52 before I realized I was starting to raise out of the water. And I'm like, okay, that's fast enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have getting to the go place a little faster, but in Winnebago, you don't necessarily go very fast all the time anyway.
Right.
I don't know too many days. Like you said, there's not many days early in the morning, maybe, and late at night. It's like that. But normally, you're going to get that constant, foot just kind of garbage that's always out there, and depending on which way it's coming from is how angry you are when you're going back and forth. Like I don't mind going into the waves coming back, but you're doing the side roll.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. There was actually an instance. So did you hear about when we had those big storms earlier this year? There was that sailboater and his two kids went missing and ended up being found.
Yep.
So that same night, I was actually over by Garlic Island, jigging crawler.
Yep.
I was catching walleye, but I'm watching this. The radar said nothing until 9 o'clock. And at 6:30, I'm looking to the west shore. I'm like, that looks pretty dark. I don't know if we should stay out here. Oh, fish on. And then just like that, the wind shifted hard out of the east. And my buddy Matt, again, ironically, was with me and his kid. And Matt's tall. He's a little bit of a bigger guy. And he's in the back of the boat. And it went from like probably foot and a half waves to 5-foot rollers. And within 30 seconds, I had water up to my ankles in the hull of my boat, and I'm like, okay, we're done.
Right.
Turn on the bilge and headed back, but because of all the extra weight, I couldn't get it to really go, so we were limping it back. And not a split second after I tied up to the dock to walk to my truck, the skies just started opening up like crazy. So I'm glad we left when we did, or that would have been.
It changes so fast out there. And it's that feeling you get, especially when all of a sudden you feel like you said, you felt that wind change and everything just kind of like, uh-oh, what's going on here, right?
Yeah.
Because the one thing about Winnebago is you can watch the storm come from a long ways away, right? I mean, it's fairly flat. I mean, if you're out in the lake, you can see things coming forever. You're like, oh, I got time. I got. And all of a sudden it's on top of you and the waves are a little bigger and a little bigger. And all of a sudden, oh no, now it's going to take me a while to get back in. I'm going to get wet. I'm going to be scared shitless for about at least 10 minutes.
Yeah, I was soaked before it started raining, but at that point, I'm just like, whatever. And I just slowly walked to my truck and again, took that L like a champ, just completely drenched.
You always have those days when the new boats. So was there anything else that came with the new boat that was different for you back and anything like that? Or everything was good?
No, so I'm actually very comfortable backing up a trailer. I was actually a motor transport operator in the Marine Corps, so I can... Yeah, I had a kid from Wisconsin, this PFC, who comes from a trucking family, and he couldn't back up a Humvee with a trailer on. So to prove a point to him as his corporal, I hooked up the 3-axle LVSR wrecker to another LVSR and then I hooked that up to a 7-ton, and I did laps around our motor pool, which the building in the motor pool is it's only probably, if you do like one garage bay back to back, it's only about that wide, but it was extremely long. I did laps around that building backwards just to prove a point to him of how silly he was being. So yeah.
Hey listeners, let's talk outdoor streaming. What is the best outdoor streaming platform out there? Well, it's simple. It's Fixed TV. Not only do they have this great program, but they have all kinds of hunting and fishing shows along with some weaponry shows. So when you get bored and need something to do, get your fix with Fixed TV. And when you're done with that and you have that fix to get out in the outdoors, jump on therealshot.com and get everything you need to satisfy your fix.
I'm the one that if I'm at the boat ramp and I'm sitting there waiting to get out of the water and I see the Illinois plates with their pontoon and they can't get it in, and then the wife tries and she almost runs on top of the dock, I'll tie off and let me do it. Like,
yeah, it doesn't have to be Illinois plates. It can be local people too, especially the springtime. That's what always crazes me, is that
Memorial Day weekend.
Yep, everybody fishes spring fishing, and it's like, even if you shouldn't, I think you shouldn't, but no one practices, no one gets ready to go, and everybody just shows up at the landing. It's like, wow. I mean, it's quite, if you're not in a hurry, it's quite a lot of fun to watch. I mean, but it's funny because I know people that they go from one size boat to the next size boat, and it can be difficult because I actually think it's easier to do a bigger boat because the longer wheelbase and smaller ones. Like recently, my son got a boat, just like a small 14-footer for banging around the river. And I went to back that in after backing this 24-foot monster, and his boat took me forever to back up because it just, the little bit, and you're out of the, that getting back to used to where when I had my 14-foot boat, I could swing that thing in anywhere I wanted to go. Just that difference of the wheelbase. The wheelbase is crazy.
The one thing that I really enjoy now with this new boat is it's on a bunk trailer and not a roller. I'll never go back to a roller trailer. God, I wanted to take the torch to that trailer so many times.
Right. And I don't know why, like when I got my first new boat, I bought it from Wentz, and they were asking what kind of trailer I wanted. So I'm like, oh, roller trailer. I don't know why I thought I wanted a roller trailer, but like you, I don't know why I ever did that. It was a pain in the ass. And yeah, I would never do that. I mean, and it was like, well, if you, I was watching things like, if you fish out places that have bad landings, the roller trailers help you and blah, 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 this and that. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And I decided to go with it. And even though the guys that went, Steve told me, don't do it. Don't get a roller trailer. I'm like, okay, I'll get a roller. No, told me not to get the roller trailer, but I did anyways. Didn't like it. And then I got a bunk and I'm like, I couldn't do without. Couldn't do without. So did you change anything of your boat when you got it? Or what did you do to make it yours?
I just kind of rearranged some of the storage. And besides that, added a bunch of dog hair. I have 2 beagles, Cody and Sassy, Cody with a K. And I pride myself in the fact that they don't like water, but they love being in the boat. If it's a nice day out, they'll find their spot in the sun, and they pretty much sleep the whole time. If there's like a boat close by and they see another dog, they'll get a little barky. But the first time we took it out was on 4th of July last year, and where your foot space is in the captain's chair and then across in the passenger chair, that foot space goes back quite a ways. Like, it's pretty deep.
Yep.
Sassy went in there, curled herself into a ball, and then just put her face on my feet and just looked up at me and was trying like not to fall asleep as she was falling asleep. Kind of made that her own space.
Right.
But as far as like different graphs or, this year I just wanted to focus on getting used to the boat, learning how to operate it properly.
Boat control.
Yeah, exactly. It currently has a G2 Helix 5 on it. I'm going to be replacing that with my Garmin, the original version of the UHD93, like the original head mount live scope.
Yep.
I'm going to put that on instead, so I have better GPS. Other than that, I don't really need to change.
I love dog boats. I always wanted one. Back when I duck hunted a bunch, I had a couple dogs that, like, obviously duck dogs. But I've always had labs, but now I have a lab that gets, pretty sure he gets car sick, basically. Motion sick.
Sure.
He fucking hates it. And I'm like, oh man, this guy's got a dog and this guy's got a dog and that guy. I'm like, it's like being on the boat. All he wants to do is throw up and shit. But I was thinking about our next dog. I'm like, maybe I'll just throw the puppy in the boat with me all the time. And what it is.
I actually have a really funny story about Cody and the boat I had prior. Speaking of your dog getting sick or whatever, we went for a 4th of July a couple years ago. We always try to find somewhere to go camping. Cody's a pretty anxious dog, so if there's a lot of other people or a lot of other dogs around, then he doesn't really respond the best. We got both of ours as rescues, but anyways, we get to this campground and the picture of the site made it look really massive. It was the size of a closet, and they were all like super squished. So no matter how far I walked him, he just wouldn't poop. So I knew it was coming. But he can only hold it in for so long before the cork pops out. So that next morning, we jump in the boat right away, and we were on Cranberry Lake, if I'm not mistaken, in the Eagle River area.
Yep.
And one of those islands, I was probably 20 to 30 yards offshore. The front of the boat was facing the island. I was casting off the captain's side. My father-in-law was on the opposite side, and my wife was out of the back. Sassy was passed out, and Cody, I had these little rails that he would walk on like a tightrope. He was doing that, but he was towards the front of the boat, so he's behind me. I don't see him, and I'm throwing a cast, and all of a sudden I hear a big splash. I'm like, oh, so I pull my line in quick. I empty out my pockets, kick off my shoes, and I jump in because he's going for the island. So I'm like, oh, no, you don't. And right as he made it to the landfall, I grabbed him, and I'd turn around, and as I'm getting back to the boat, my wife and her dad are just pissing their pants laughing. Right next to the trolling motor mount, just this big heaping, like,
had to go.
I couldn't even be mad at him,
Right?
but it was just so funny because we think that he did that and knew he was in trouble, so he just jumped out of the boat.
I'm out of here. Good luck with that. That's funny. Yeah, dogs in a boat seem like to be so much fun. I mean, there's ones that every now and then you have ones people that have that bark nonstop, but not too many of those. Most dogs are pretty. I'm on a boat.
Yeah.
I don't know. I relax on a boat. You think they'd relax too?
Yeah. Yeah, I like to bring them on the as many of the veteran trips I run as I can because they're really good at. They're not like officially service animals, but they can tell when someone's under some sort of stress.
Right.
I have a picture of on my phone. When I was ice fishing a couple years ago, I had a group that we split the cost of a cabin, and I brought all the rods and jacks and everything out. And when we were at the cabin at the end of the day, Sassy jumped in this older gentleman's lap and just looked up at him. He just kept petting her, and she sat there smiling, and they were sitting there for like probably 2 hours, just not saying a word, just
Right.
staring at each other. So
That's cool. I mean, yeah, dogs are like fishing, I guess. They relax people.
Yeah.
Outdoors. They relax. So if you could only go ice fishing one more time, where would you go?
oh boy.
Well, actually, first, is there any like bucket trips for you that you want to do?
Um,
Things you want to do?
I want to go up to Canada and hit some ice, and I would love to go out west to hit the Dakotas and is it the Cascade Reservoir in Idaho?
Maybe in a panfish guy, you want to go into. No one wants to go to Iowa. Apparently, they have huge bluegill down there, and all those farm ponds and stuff. I had a guy on, I don't know, 3 months ago, and talk about how the world record bluegills are going to come from Iowa because all these big ass hybrid bluegills they put in all these farm ponds and stuff like that.
You know, it's funny you say that because I just got an email from a bait shop. Is it Okeechobee? Did I say that right? Something with the O and ends with a BI. Anyways, so next winter I might grab some of my Neptune staff and make a run down to Iowa for a weekend. But if it was up to me, I've never really ice fished Minnesota other than a private pond.
Yep.
So I'd love to hit like your Mill Locks, Upper Red, whatever the case.
There's a lot of stuff.
I know, but I would love to hit Devil's Lake and all those other awesome fisheries in the Dakotas, and obviously Canada because it's Canada. That's the place to go.
Right. Maybe by the time, so this won't come out till February. Maybe by then we'll own Canada.
I mean, we should start with the UP and just, baby steps.
Funny. So what regulations regulations do you think need to be added or that we need to be thinking about in the future to keep our fishing good?
I definitely think we need to reduce bag limits. It seems like the lakes where they're 25 per person for panfish, seems like they get hit pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said earlier, with all this fancy sonars and stuff that we have, nature doesn't have a way to compensate for that. I think 10, maybe 15 panfish max, 5 of species. I know I'm probably going to get rated in the comments for that, but I don't care. So something along that line.
Especially those smaller lakes. They don't take much to kill a small lake.
Yeah.
It only takes basically, 4 or 5 guys and about a dozen trips. And that lake's probably done for a few years.
Easily. That's kind of what's going on with where my aunt has a cabin on Big Sand. Years ago, we would go out and fill a 5-gallon bucket full of bluegills with our pinky finger. And now it's starting to come up on the rise again. But for a long time, the bluegill were just all so tiny. None of them were growing. Obviously, there's a bunch of predators in that lake too. But they put a special regulation for a size limit on gills. And that kind of brought it back a little bit. But now it seems like it's starting to trend down again. But I would say something along that line. And on the Winnebago system, I'd probably bring a slot limit back, 3 of any size. When I drive over the Winneconne Bridge in the spring on my way to work and I see a bunch of 13, 12, 11, 10-inch walleye in people's buckets, I'm like, just go perch fishing at that point. So I think they need to do something along that line for the Winnebago system as well.
Yeah, I would like to see a slot limit of 1/20. At least 1/20, and the three couldn't have come any bit of her time coming out of 2020 there, and all the new fishermen to the system dropping it down to 3. I think made a really big difference and probably saved it.
Yeah,
I am a little worried because I've been out on Bago lately catching these huge freaking perch, and I have a feeling that we're not going to see them very long. I wish they would do something with that to keep them around. Because we were out and everything we caught was over 11 inches, which is just mind numbing for me. We couldn't even find anything small. Everything was or bigger, right? Or 12 and a half. And it's like, let's just protect it. Let's make sure we can, make it 5 or 6 a day. And because a 12, 13 inch perch, that's a nice perch.
And after 13 inches, I don't think they eat very good.
Right. And no one keeps anything smaller. Everybody just keeps the big stuff. And I get it. Everybody wants to catch fish. And that makes sense, but at some point you got to know what you're doing because those fish aren't generally males, right?
Almost always female.
Almost always females, and that's just all you're doing is filming. Which is crazy because it's been so many years where nothing out there. Last year I started catching perch, pulling salmos over rock piles and stuff, going for walleyes. I'm like, look at this. Every now and then you catch a nice one, and now seeing out ice fish and seeing that they're just everywhere out there. And it's like, I hope we know enough to take care of them.
I feel like with perch, they're not as susceptible to overharvest as like your walleye are. It seems like, from my experience anyway, and if I'm wrong, so be it. But I think they reproduce a lot more easier. And I think that's why you see these trends where like these 3 years, they're really good. And then they kind of level out and then they're on the rise again. Then they kind of level out. Because I've noticed that with some inland lakes too. And it seems like the Winnebago system is kind of in the middle of something like that. Because I think it was 2 years ago, Corey at Fishtails said the perch fishing is the best that he's seen in the last 10 years. So it's on the rise, but I think it's eventually going to kind of level off. And then a couple years after, it's going to kind of come back.
I feel like it's been so long since it was so decimated back in the early 2000s. There was nothing around. I don't remember catching perch at all. Although there used to be a lot more crappies out there too.
Yeah, I wouldn't be mad if crappies came back.
Crappies have kind of disappeared. You catch them trolling every now and then, but definitely ice fishing, you always catch them. Schoolfish, white bass come in. There's always a crappie or two on the top or whatever. That was always fun to catch them.
Definitely.
Cool. So anything big coming up on the horizon for the year? What are you looking for in 2025?
I got a couple things in the works. February 15th, we have the Timmy tournament with the Ice Junkies up on the chain at Deerfoot Lodge near Hayward.
Nice.
I'm doing a Purple Heart trip for 10 Purple Heart recipients in the Land O'Lakes Phelps area. Myself, Diehard Angling through Ultimate Veteran Adventures, and we're also working with another group called High Point Adventures to take 10 of them out on the ice for the day. So I got some stuff like that lined up. I have a salmon trip for the organization through the Medusa on Buzz Charters out of Kiwani. We have a morning trip, lunch, and then we're taking another group out for an afternoon trip all on the same day. So I'm going to be pretty gassed by the time I get home that night. Awesome. But yeah, other than that, I'm just kind of building my resume, trying to get some more bigger names to sponsor me and what we do with the organization. And I got to attend the St. Paul Ice Show for the first time. I worked the Neptune booth and I made some awesome connections, met some really big names in the industry. And yeah, it'll be a fun year, kind of just pumping out more social media stuff, trying to grow. And
so if somebody wants to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you?
So they'll find me online if you look up Echo 4 Delta Outdoors on Facebook. That's my Facebook page where I make content. I do a lot of after action reports and highlights from the veteran trips I run. But they'll spell the word Echo, then the number 4, and then the word Delta. And that's actually an Easter egg, I guess you could call it. So when we're in the Marine Corps, when we're on the radio, we don't use our names. So we come up with a call sign.
Yep.
Now, when we're in garrison, we do a more formal setting versus just like a nickname when you're in country. So the E for Echo stands for enlisted. Number 4 is your rank. So I was the 4th enlisted rank, so corporal. And then the D in Delta is my last name. So if I go COG is Echo 4 Delta Headquarters Company Motor T, they know exactly who they're talking to. Just because a lot of people message me asking what the heck is with the name. I just wanted to put that out there. On TikTok, I'm at Alex Neptune 34. And I just got into the Instagram page, even though I don't like all the extra apps. Dvorak Outdoors 1.0.
Cool. Well, thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And like I said, I looked at the guest list of all the prior names that have come through here. So I'm very blessed and humbled to be invited.
Oh, that's no problem. Just like everybody else, I think we just like listen. I like when I'm driving around the car and when I leave here, I'll throw on a podcast and listen to whoever talk about fishing. I think we all can sit down and talk about fishing all that pretty much.
I used to work at a bait shop the summer before, 2 summers before I went into the military. I lived in Oceanside, California for 6 months, and I worked at a bait shop out there, and I got paid to talk fishing all day.
Right?
Cash. I didn't have to pay taxes on it neither. And the owner would pay me on Saturdays for 4 hours to go to the harbor, try a new bait that he ordered, and write a report on it, and advise him if it would sell or if it wasn't worth putting on the shelf. That was still to this day the best job I ever had.
A great job. Yeah. I'm looking at a job like that. That'd be cool.
I know, right?
But well, thanks for being on.
No, thanks for having me, man.
No problem. And if you're looking to be on an episode of Walleye Chronicles, remember we talk about everything, not just walleyes. Hit me up on my socials at Matt Snell on Instagram and Facebook, or on TikTok at Smile and Fish if it's still around. Remember, there's 2 things you do every day to give somebody a great day. 1 is give them a smile, and 2, take them fishing. Thanks a lot.